lauded for its cuisine and a favorite for its festive atmosphere. However, many don't know or understand the neighborhoods of New Orleans. And these neighborhoods are diverse and largely misunderstood as to their complexities. Our neighborhoods are a beautiful patchwork quilt made up, oh, I need your mic. That's new to me. So our neighborhoods are made up of a beautiful patchwork quilt that is made up of rich, colorful, and tightly woven fabric with a multitude of beautifully diverse threads from uptown to downtown, back of town and out east. This is a city in love with its neighborhoods: the Irish Channel, the French Quarter, Treme, waterfront neighborhoods like Bywater, Lakefront, the Marigny, the deeply traditional neighborhoods of the 6th, 7th, 8th, and the mighty 9th Ward, to the University, Mid-City, and newer neighborhoods of New Orleans East, all surrounded by the exceptional natural landscape of our region. These are the same neighborhoods that after the devastation of Katrina and the federal levees failure, gathered in vacant parking lots, surrounded by destruction, and told the world they would bring their neighborhoods back. And bring them back, they did. So it was the summer of 2007. Oh, wow.
Number three is the magic number.
Wow. Miss Wanda Brazil would be very disappointed in me as a theater person that I'm not projecting. The summer of 2007, I entered the Musician Union Hall where a large roundtable of community and neighborhood residents were gathered and discussing a topic titled Citizen Participation. The room was filled with 40 persons or more of diverse ethnicities and from every walk of life in every neighborhood. As a native New Orleanian, newly returning to the city, I found this to be energizing and fascinating. Yet those that were present and engaged behaved as though this was a norm. Well, it had been for them for the past 2 years. However, it was as though I had entered a time warp of the 1960s civil rights movement. I enjoyed seeing the passion that filled each presenter's eyes and how their hands and words flew across the room could easily have been construed as being argumentative. Thanks to my good friend Karen Gabois, I later learned this is how you created space for dissent. This was my first day as the executive director of this newly created movement called Citizen Participation. That was 3 years ago. It feels like a lifetime for me, and for many of you, it has been. This network that I was witnessing was built by a group of ordinary citizens aimed to being seen and heard in a unified and connective manner. It was their desire to no longer be ignored or panhandled by servant leaders who in turn would dictate to them how they choose to serve the people. Beginning with a kitchen table of 10, this energy evolved into a need to connect all people to the process. By December 12th, 2007, and I remember that day very vividly because I walked into the room, the Wednesday forum, and there was less than 15 people in the room, and 9 of them were my staff. This bothered me greatly. I began to talk to the local sociologists in the city and ask them what was going on. What was I doing wrong? And their talk to me was that soon as we as residents began to get life back to normal, there was no longer a need for us to gather and expend that energy. Well, I disagreed with them because I was taught that energy is neither lost nor destroyed, but it is merely transferred. So I began my journey with a question of where had that energy gone? I left that meeting disturbed, and my understanding began with vocabulary. The first thing I wanted to know, what is a neighborhood? So Webster described a neighborhood as the geographic area in which your house is situated or the dwelling of your house near or adjacent to another. This was not my neighborhood because I did not live next door to anything but blight and vacant property. So I needed a new neighborhood. And I defined my neighborhood as a network of countless personal connections, both weak and strong, forming a web of trust and encouraging feelings of place and belonging. And that web of connection can only be spun at human speed. And so when I did that conversation, and that described my neighborhood, and I was very content with my definition, I still was perplexed and angry because I was like, what was going on? So later that afternoon, that weekend, I spent the weekend with my 5-year-old niece. Her name is Mimi, but we call her Mini Me. And Mimi's favorite show is Sesame Street, the 25th anniversary specifically. She likes to watch that on the weekends. And she looks at me and she says, Tim, this is what you do. Smiling, I only responded to her and said, no, baby, that's not what Tim do. She does not play on Sesame Street. But her argument convinced me that maybe I need to look closer into the words of this child and see what she's talking about. Mr. Jim Henson and his Muppets did something that allowed my generation and future generations to understand tolerance and how to build community holistically. He taught us that the differences can exist in people no matter where they are, what language they spoke, or what they look like. And so I began to examine each and every character on Sesame Street. I looked at Mr. Hooper. Mr. Hooper was a centralized location in Sesame Street where everyone on Sesame Street went to get coffee and a newspaper, so they got information. But they also exchanged information with one another. Then I looked at Oscar. Despite how people feel about Oscar, that's the government. They know exactly what's going on. They know how to get information to you, and they know how to tell you information. Big Bird. Who else but Big Bird would be social services? He cared about everybody and anybody in the community. The only person who Big Bird, who could see Mr. Snuffleupagus was Big Bird. So that's our invisible communities. That's your homeless, your elders, your youth, your disabled residents. These are just a few of them. But what I learned is that Sesame Street took into consideration that every person needs to belong to the community. And that New Orleans neighborhoods are like xylophones, with both high and low bars of capacity, all playing beautiful melodies of sound to make the city a great place. However, in order for those melodies to be sounds to be heard, there needs to be a broadened process for civic education and civic participation. I leave you this morning, with this quote. And I usually replace society in this quote with neighborhoods. It's a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. And he said, "There is nothing more dangerous than to build a neighborhood with a large segment of people in that neighborhood who feel they have no stake in it, who feel that they have nothing to lose. People who have a stake in their neighborhood protect that neighborhood. But when they don't, they unconsciously destroy it." Thank you.